So earlier this year, I played and beat a game called Demon Turf. Besides thinking I made that video in September 2021, I gave my first impression for it, and I can still say that I recommend that, as well as recommending you watch my video with my first impressions on it, play the game for yourself, and then come back to this video, just so you don't get minor spoilers. But really, the spoilers isn't too different from platformers akin to something like Mario, just with a small twist in there. So without further ado, this is Demon Turf Neon Splash. So if it wasn't clear how I feel about the main game from my first video, I genuinely loved the game, as the quality this indie team put into it, the amounts of efforts within the smaller details, as well as how the game plays as a 3D platformer but with 2D sprites. I really loved every moment the game had. I mean, you know a game is really good when you leave the quip options on and you question why it was even a thing that you could disable in the first place. Granted, I never really had a problem with Bubsy making obnoxious noises, so maybe I'm just the weird one. So the main game story was about kicking the demon lord's butt because he taunted Beebs in a dream. She is also the character you will take control of and go off on a big adventure because of her taunted dream, with a hub area and 4 other branching world areas containing those worlds, biome and atmospheres, and each individual levels you access through those worlds hub areas. It was a big move the devs went with, and I'd even say it has that AAA games level of polish, or just polish. Game companies don't set the standards, they just make games cost $10 more. But anyways, for what it was and what it had, it was great. So you'd probably be surprised how this side story sequel, something along those lines, yeah. It has dialogue about the end of the first game, so you know, as mentioned before, spoilers is obvious from the main game's premise, but nonetheless, yes, this game being a sequel of sorts, I was surprised they simplified the game, but I don't want to necessarily label it as simple, meaning bad, and more of a format change. Neon Splash is definitely a less story and more gameplay focused game, but at least the vast amount of options are still present here within the pause menu, along with all the other stuff hidden within it. In this game, the story is as such. Beebs and her 2 friends, Midgey and Lucy, find a SM64 painting, and Midgey, being as curious as he is, gets his friends warped into the mentioned painting. And that's it for the story, really. The game has that classic traditional level-by-level Super Mario Bros.-esque progression system. It really felt jarring when I first saw it, but only because I went in blind and extremely rusty. I also have my playthrough up on the live tab on my channel, so go witness me suck at platforming for the first 45 minutes. Though I did suck at the game for a good 45 minutes, I love that feeling of going through the game slow and slowly getting better, and how I'd go about levels on my reruns. Unlike the main game, there's been a change on how certain power-ups you can unlock are utilized. I do have a bad memory, but if I remember correctly, the main game made it so that you had to toggle certain power-ups, and it wasn't just assigned to a button. I could be wrong on that, I don't know. Either way, I still got more accustomed with the game, and by the end of it, I was able to beat previous records. Since just like the main game, it promotes replayability via collectible lollipops that'll help you unlock mods. Vinyl or vinyl, I don't really know how that's really pronounced. I'm pretty sure it's vinyl. Vinyl disc that'll unlock a remix version of all the levels within this game, which is also something the main game did the moment you beat a world's boss, and I really like that as a feature. And lastly, my already mentioned record beating. My best advice that I kind of like forgot when I first played through this game is to breeze through the level to set a record, then collect all that you need without worrying about the timer, or just do you for your first playthrough. Taking a relaxing break before talking about the levels you'll be going through, you can go to this private isle your friends made as to have a home base to catch up with how the game works. I find this really useful and would even recommend anyone to make use of it as to experiment your playstyles, since even me, being as rusty as I was, had my fair share of failing and forgetting how the game plays. While you go about this area, you learn about your powers, the advanced movements you can do, and what certain objects do what. Each little signpost has something useful to say and will be something to pay attention to, lest you want to fail and fall into the many voids the game has. It felt good catching up with this game, but I still wish they added in a photo mode more than just the first person and selfie camera, just so you can just rotate the camera around and take good pictures with good angling. So moving on, and considering the game's title name, the rest of the game's aesthetic reflects that look. I do recommend you turn off the RGB split effect if you can. I did this only because I didn't like the filters that it had, made the game look all fuzzy and blurry, but to each their own. Maybe your eyes might thank you for it. Bees moving on the ground, has some neon paint trail, and I really can't think of anything to add to that, but unlike the splash into the title, you cannot splash into the water, which felt odd considering the main game did underwater traversal well. Hell, the water world might make you think of OOT's Water Temple, or, you know, the whole water hating level trope. But the handling of the swimming and the transformation beeps takes had that flair to it. And I was pretty disappointed just to see that it was dropped here. But now that the basics in the gameplay understanding out of the way, time for the actual levels themselves, or at least little bits and pieces here, because I really don't want to rob you all from the experience of the game itself. The first 3 levels you start off with consist of a pool, beachy and ship sailing themed type of level vibe, but for the most part levels still have that straightforward design to them as the main game. Though this time around there's not really any cool little Easter egg like inclusions, and all the levels are just you, your 2 friends every now and then, and the many obstacles you will face to progress the game. Also, something I noticed when rewatching some of my footage was how the levels early on seem to be connecting the journey you go on. For example, on the 3rd level, around the end to it, you don't see water anymore, but fluffy clouds. But speaking of fluffy clouds, that detail made me notice how most of these levels are just you elevating yourself, which I find pretty ironic since these characters being demons, you can only assume that they're from hell. So yeah, I think I'll leave that for the levels. As I said before, you really should give this game and the main game a shot for yourself, so enjoy the remaining clips. I mentioned in my first video how much I love the music in that game, but I sadly can't say the same for this one. It's not so much as the genre it would be considered for, but more along the lines of sounding all the same. If it's not, then I couldn't really tell by a lot, but I can't say it did help with the mindless fun of platforming, providing while making button inputs based off of the music beats. Definitely made me have to start over a few times, but I couldn't help but crack a smile because of it. Just as long as you remember to set your own checkpoints. Still love that that's a thing and feel more games should utilize it, but yeah, as long as you set those, you should be alright when you're trying to get accustomed to the level. Also, side note about the music, in the subway level, the game does the whole muffled music when inside of the trains. Just thought I'd throw that in there to not seem like everything audio wise is bad, and though most music is samey, they did have their subtle differences, even if it was just a little bit noticeable. Considering this series has its replayability in check, maybe you'll find a tune you may fawn over for if you ever need a pick-me-up, fast-paced music, or just for your leisure on your own time. But to be honest, I can't really add anything more to this besides the fact that the game has its remixed versions of the levels that you traverse when you collect the vinyl discs for those non-remix levels. The game overall is a good 2-hour experience, if not a little less than that. I haven't gotten 100% yet, so maybe there's something story and gameplay wise that will bypass that 100% into more, because the game definitely hints to it, but by the time this video is out, I probably already have that info, or maybe not, but I do feel you should play both of these games. I can't stress this enough. I really wish more people saw my first video so they can share my enjoyment from it. But yeah, this was Demon Turf Neon Splash. If you like this video, check out my other stuff in my showcase playlist, and until next time, see ya.